So hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is making advertising claims for the new wave of climate change formulations. So this is actually a presentation I gave at Cosmetics Formulation Summit last year, and the theme was all about the new wave of climate change formulations, hence the title. So I was really focusing on what the advertising claims were that focused in that area. Obviously, it's been about a year since that conference was on, so I thought it's a great time to revisit the subject. A lot has changed. There's been new trends. There's been the same trends that I'll revisit as well. And there's also been new regulations that have come into place that are specifically for things like green products, whatever that means. We'll look at that a little bit as well and think about what that kind of thing means. So yeah, I thought it'd be a great chance to kind of readdress this topic and give some more information out there. So just so you know, the webinar is being recorded, and I will be sending out the recording after the webinar. There is also going to be the chance for a Q&A at the end. So if you've got any questions as we go through, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box on your Zoom panel. And also feel free to use the chat as well if there's anything you want to share with other audience members or anything you want to put in there as well, you're very welcome to. So just to go through the agenda of today, we'll be looking at some advertising standards, so how all adverts are regulated. And then we'll also be looking at particular regulations. As I mentioned, literally last month, we've had some new regulations coming in the UK for green claims. So I'll be looking at those. We'll be looking at advertising trends and what kind of claims have been, what examples of brands are using them. Looking at methods of claim substantiation, because that's obviously really, really important if we're putting claims out there. As we'll talk about, if they're getting regulated, we need to have some evidence, and I'll be sharing some case studies of those as well. So yeah, it's going to be a bit of a mix of different trends and claims and things like that. So if you've got any questions as we go through, as I say, just feel free to put them in the little Q&A box. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Regulatory Director at Aiton Global Research. So we conduct consumer research to substantiate perception claims and to get product feedback. So again, one of those things that is becoming more prevalent within the kind of climate change, formulations, green code, thing like that. It's becoming more and more necessary for brands not just to rely on the green claims they're making, but also to make sure their product performs. If you look back a few years ago, you know, there was only so many products that were coming across as green or sustainable, but now almost every brand that's already established and lots of new brands have got that as part of their repertoire. So just saying your product is sustainable isn't really enough anymore. You need to make sure that your consumers like it as well. So you can always reach out to me if you've got any questions about consumer research. As I said, I'm the regulatory specialist, so I really specialize in claim substantiation and advertising as well. So that's really where this webinar is all about. It's all about my speciality in this area. So just to kind of set the scene for today, I want to talk a little bit about the cosmetic market for green cosmetics. And again, whatever that means. So Statista have kind of grouped it as things that have claims such as cruelty-free, natural ingredients, and without preservatives. Now that's kind of the similar claims that they're seeing that kind of make that green cosmetic category. And it's been growing considerably. So in the UK alone, obviously it's a good global is a good global industry, but in the UK alone, the organic and natural market in 2020 was amounted to around 221 million. I need to warm up my voice today, so sorry if I get my tongue twisted. So absolutely, the consumers themselves are more aware of obviously climate change. I mean, as I said, it's not like this is a new problem, but we're seeing in 2020 alone. I mean, there are things like the global pandemic, I think made everyone think even closer about the habits they're making, you know, not driving to work and then going, do I need to drive to work every day? And also thinking about the products they're putting on their skin and what they're buying. So yeah, certainly that is almost every consumer is having a consideration about that side of what they're consuming for any of their consumer goods. Also Formula Botanica, they were saying that skincare is the top part of the global organic beauty market. So skincare is still very much prevalent, and it's closely followed by hair care. So two really important product categories within the organic beauty market to think about there. So before I go into the different product claims more specifically, I just want to talk about how adverts are regulated. So I'm sure if you've seen my webinars before, you're very aware about advertising regulations, but it's something to always consider, because no matter what we're saying about our product, there is always a regulation to follow. So whether you're going for the cosmetics claims or competition claims, whatever it is going to be regulated by the relevant self-regulatory organization in the country you're selling your product. So it basically means that instead of someone reviewing every single advert you put out there and making sure that it's not misleading or anything like that, you have to kind of regulate yourself. You have to make sure you know what the code of conduct is for those relevant organizations in the country you're selling your product, and make sure that you're following that code of conduct. So basically, it's all kind of on a complaints basis. So if you don't regulate yourself, if you don't follow that code of conduct, okay, maybe no one's going to come knocking on your door straight away and saying you can't say that. But if you're saying things about your product and you can't achieve them, and your consumers use your product, say it's, I don't know, it's a green foundation, it's organic, but it doesn't actually give you the coverage that it says it's going to give you, then maybe you go, it's not giving me that coverage. I don't believe that they've actually got any evidence behind those claims. I am going to complain to my relevant SRO, and they're going to investigate it for me. So then that organization, for example, in the UK, it's the Advertising Standards Authority, will look into your evidence behind your claims and make sure what you're saying is true. It could also be your competitors. So again, if you've got other competitors out there and you're saying, I don't know, uses less water in manufacturing process than such and such a brand, and then they turn around and go, no, I don't think they do use any less water than us, then they would complain as well. So you need to make sure that you've got that information ready. And that's really how it's done in a lot of countries. There are exceptions. Places like the USA and the UAE do have federal bodies that look at adverts as well. But generally, you need to know who the SROs are and look at what their code of conduct is. It's all pretty straightforward stuff. And as I say, the main thing is making sure you've got evidence behind your claims. So if you ever come under scrutiny, people ever complain, you can say, no, that's fine. I'm really confident here. This is my evidence. I'm absolutely telling the truth. So you're kind of covered on that sense. The other kind of side of obviously regulation is cosmetic regulation. So there's, again, different cosmetic regulations across the world. I've chosen the EU because at the moment it's also still reflected in the UK regulation. Obviously, because of Brexit, we've now got the UK cosmetic regulation, but it's exactly the same as the EU one. And in fact, a lot of countries use the EU regulation as a basis because it's just so good. So the cosmetic claims criteria is part of their regulation as well. So again, not just advertising regulation. If you're selling a cosmetic, you need to be making sure that you're abiding by cosmetic regulation. And they've got 6 common criteria for cosmetic claims. So it's like a really good kind of thought process. Whenever you're putting a claim on your cosmetic, have I covered all these common criteria to make sure I'm compliant? So just to break down what they are, you've got legal compliance. So obviously your product has to be legally compliant. You can't use that as a claim. So you can't have on your product, is compliant with the EU cosmetic regulation, because everyone is, and it's not kind of something to brag about. It just has to be part of your process. It needs to be truthful. So if you're saying, as I said, this product uses less water than other brands, you can't just say that. You need to prove that you've got the manufacturing process in place to make sure that you have got less water consumption through the manufacturing process. You can't just lie about it. You have to have some evidence there. And in terms of that evidential support, everything must be backed up. If you're going to say anything about your product, whether it's a literature review, an ingredient claim, a clinical study, a consumer study, you need to have some evidence behind it. And we'll go through some of that today as well. You need to be honest. So obviously, again, if you're saying, if you were looking at the data that you have behind your product. So let's say you used 50%, I'm really bad with actual amounts of water that would be used in a cosmetic, but I'm going down this road now. If you would say I use 50% more, less water in the manufacturing process, then blah, 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 you need to be honest about what that reflects. So if it turns out that it was a very small study, it wasn't really represented, or it was less than 50%, but you rounded it up, you're not really showing that data honestly. It needs to be completely honest. You need to be fair. And again, I'll keep using thing. It's usually for comparison claims. If you're going to make any comparison, it has to be like for like. You couldn't say you're using less water in a manufacturing process if the brand you were talking about, you know, is a, I don't know, a water company. I don't know. I don't know why I'm using this example because I'm so bad with this knowledge about how things are manufactured. But you would have to use someone that is kind of giving a similar claim and has a similar benchmark. I mean, without using that comparison, my favorite comparison is always like an anti-dandruff shampoo. You couldn't say removes more flakes than such and such a brand if theirs isn't an anti-dandruff shampoo. And because obviously it's not really comparing like for like. At the end of the day, your consumers need to be able to make an informed decision about purchasing your product. So that's really what this all comes together for. They need to be able to see those claims and really know what they're buying and know that it's right for them. Then we've got the other side of the regulation. So we're going to bore you all to death with regulations, but I think it's all really, really important before we go into those examples of claims. And as I mentioned, the UK government has just put out the Green Claims Code checklist, and this literally came out at the end of September, so it's brand new, and it's all pretty straightforward. But again, it's really important you know this and you're looking at these regulations. It's also been reflected at the bottom. You can see I've got the link for the Green Claims Code, but it's also been reflected by the ASA. They've put it into their environmental claims section of their code as well. So just to kind of run through some of the checklist as well. Obviously, it needs to be accurate and clear for all to understand. This is all kind of replication of everything you see in a claim. It needs to have up-to-date, credible evidence to show that it's true. So you need to make sure you've got recent evidence, and it needs to be credible. So generally, it's things like using an independent body and making sure that you have the right analysis in place to show that that is true. It needs to, so it can't contain partially correct or incorrect aspects or conditions that apply. This is really important when you're looking at any claim as well. If you're making a claim and then you kind of have a really small fine print that says, you know, only used in this temperature on this skin and blah, 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 it's not really fair because it doesn't mean the average consumer can relate to it. So make sure that you haven't got kind of weird kind of caveats to your claim. Where general claims, so things like eco-friendly, green or sustainable are being made, it needs to reflect the whole life cycle of the brand, product, business or service, and it needs to be justified by evidence. So if you're using a claim that is super broad, like sustainable or green, you need to show that that is going through every single kind of cycle of that product formulation. You cannot just say it. And again, this is why these codes are so important. They're coming in because people have been a bit cheeky in terms of how they use these claims. Again, it doesn't have to have a caveat to the claim. So it's kind of, I kind of already said that basically when I was talking about my example of conditions that apply. It needs to be clearly set out and understood by all. It can't exaggerate its impact on the environment or anything like that. So you can't say, you know, this will reduce the Earth's plastic waste by 80% if you have not got the information behind it. The claim can't miss information or hide it. It needs to be able to make, again, really important. I thought this one because it replicates the cosmetic regulation. People need to be able to make informed choices. So it needs to be very, very clear so people can make the right decision. And again, if a comparison is being used, it needs to be fair and accurate and clear for all to understand. So again, I always like it when regulations kind of echo each other. So this really echoes the cosmetic regulation. And I think that's really important. So you can kind of see it's all saying the same thing and making sure that we're doing the right things with our advertising. So Let's talk about some trends and some claims in particular, specifically for climate change products. So the three trends I want to talk about today are going to be sustainability, anti-pollution, and naturalness. Now, these are the three trends I talked about last year, but I still think they're super relevant. And I still, as a consumer research company, this is still a huge thing that we are testing at the moment. So I thought they were really good to concentrate on. So first thing is sustainability. Why do we want to talk about that? So consumers, as I mentioned earlier, are increasingly looking for products that are more natural, but also that have sustainability, sustainable principles about their products. So things like sustainably sourced claims. It's going to be really hard if I can't say this word for this section. Sustainably sourced claims, things like green from concept to shelf, packaging free. These are the sorts of things we're seeing there. So let's have a little look at packaging free as an example there. Now, I think Lush are a great example of this. They have been kind of at the forefront of packaging free, or at least, one of the most popular brands that's been really shown to be doing this. They've been doing it for many years. So as their kind of big advert on their website says, it's better naked, reducing the plastic waste with packaging-free pampering. So again, using any things like bar products. So they've got things about shower products, hair products, face products, body products, makeup, everything that is to do with exactly this kind of big trend of having packaging-free cosmetics. So an example of what they're putting on there, they've got their Scrubby, which is a body butter. So what are they saying in terms of their claims and things like this? They're saying, meet Scrubby, the newest buffer on the block. With all the hydrating honey and cocoa butter, he may seem like a real softie, but don't underestimate his polishing power. He's packed full of ground coconut shells and ground almonds to give you a gentle, effective exfoliation. Now, why did I think this was a really interesting one to talk about? As I said earlier, we'll talk about different claims. This is an example of using ingredient claims. So instead of saying the product's doing things, they're saying the ingredients that they're using within it have that benefit. So this is when people will use their ingredients claims as their main claims. It's not my favorite thing to do, and it's something that the industry is slightly knuckling down on, because even if you have ingredient claims in there, you're not necessarily showing that the final product is going to deliver this. Now, they may have some information, they may have some data on the final product being tested, but they haven't shared that on their product page. And I think it's really important to be very transparent. What else do they have on there? They've got product reviews. So one that's on there is, I absolutely adore this little bee. It smells heavenly, and all the rough skin on my back of my arms is smoothed out, and my skin is now as soft as a baby's. I love not having to moisturize and get after getting out of the shower, as this does an amazing job, and I feel like a buttery princess. Lovely review. Now, what's really important here is we've got those ingredient claims, we've got this product review, and it's something that people can be tripped up by, because obviously like I said, we haven't necessarily got any claims about the product itself. So the Advertising Standards Authority released this a couple of years ago, saying that marketers may not use testimonials to circumvent the code by making claims in a customer review that they would not otherwise be permitted to make. For example, if a marketer doesn't hold the evidence to substantiate an efficacy claim, they cannot use a testimonial which makes that claim. Testimonials and reviews alone do not constitute substantiation, so marketers should not rely on testimonials to support for any direct or implied claims in the marketing communication. So as I said, there's no, I'm not saying that they haven't got any evidence behind this product and behind the efficacy, but it's not very transparent on the website about where that has come from. So a combination of ingredient claims and product reviews could leave them under scrutiny if they are using them as claims, which they kind of are, because it's really out there in their advert. So how do we make sure that we would, if we were in their situation, we had the product reviews, we had the ingredient claims, and our ASA came to us and said, actually, this isn't enough evidence to substantiate what you're saying. What would we do? We would run a consumer research study. This is because we've already got some great evidence behind the ingredient. We've already got some great reviews. Now we just need some quantitative data that has come through a statistical analysis to say, yes, if we were going to give this to the public, general public, this would reflect what their opinions would be. And we've got some evidence behind that claim to say, yes, that's the effect that people are going to receive when they test the product. So a consumer study or an in-use test is based on the consumer's perception. So as we said, things like the skin feeling buttery, soft, getting rid of rough skin, these are all things that consumers can perceive themselves, so they can do it for an in-use test. It reflects the actual conditions for the product in use. So again, they're using it as they usually would at home, you know, getting the little bee and having it, rubbing it all in their skin in the shower. And it's not something that's being applied because that's not very realistic in terms of the kind of evidence you'd expect to receive. And we're making sure that, yeah, exactly, they're kind of answering online questionnaires, reviewing that as well. You can also use this kind of methodology to compare products. So as we were talking about comparison claims earlier, if we wanted to say it got rid of more rough skin than a certain other product, that would be the kind of thing we would do here. You may need some additional evidence, so what we would call things like instrumental studies. In this case, though, these are all things they say the consumer can perceive themselves. So what does that look like? I think it's always really important to go through these kind of case studies to let you know for similar products what kind of tests we would run. So in terms of the case I want to run through today, it's a green skincare brand that are green from ingredient to formulation and packaging, and they've got a retinol solid bar. So the reason they wanted to test this product is to substantiate the advertising claims, particularly in the improvement in appearance of aging skin. And they want to make sure that their research is going to help them achieve their status as a prestige brand. So as I was saying earlier, you see lots of kind of, let's say mass green products out there, things like packaging free, but not necessarily prestige. And I think a really good way of elevating that marketing and standing within the prestige brands is by having some really solid evidence behind your claims as well. So who do we want to test this product? We wanted to be really inclusive. So we needed to have some representative panel here. So we had 70% female, so that's the main target consumer expecting, but also had a group of male participants as well. We had representative ethnicities for the demographic of the UK, because that is where the study was taking place, and that's where the product's going to be marketed. Then we had to think about aging skin, and what does that mean? What kind of skin problems are going to be common there? And what kind of skin problems do we expect this product formulation to have an effect on? So things like fine lines and wrinkles, uneven skin tone, hyperpigmentation or sun or UV skin damage, and rough skin as well. So how did the consumers have to use the product to reflect their actual use? So they used it once daily at night times before they went to bed for the duration of the 4-week study. 4 weeks is a great amount of time for skincare because we can see those effects over time. So after cleansing at night, warm the bar on your hands until you feel the balm begin to ease, and then apply the product to fine lines and wrinkles on the face, neck, and décolletage. So this is all about, again, we wanted to get that feedback of how it was to use it as a bar, because a lot of people use skincare not in a bar format. It's reasonably new to a lot of people. So what were the results after we sent out the product and they filled in their questionnaire? So I've taken a tiny excerpt from the report here. So selected a few questions, but really at the end, you get obviously a huge breakdown report, but you get a lovely appendix at the end, which just shows the overview of how many people agreed with each claim. So you know you can use it in your marketing. So in this case, we had the questions obviously on the left, as you can see. Then we've got the number of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied answer, and then the percentage of people that had a satisfied, neutral, or not satisfied answer. So in this case, we had things about the skin feeling moisturized. 83% of people agreed. Skin looking more luminous. People saying that they can see the appearance of their fine lines and wrinkles have diminished, and people saying about their skin's texture has improved as well. So they've all achieved over 70%, and in some cases over 80%. Now, 70% tends to be a pass mark for most people, because obviously to advertise on things like television, you need to have received a 70% pass mark. So yeah, this is quite a good example of how that looks when you're thinking about the claims, for particular a solid bar product. What other kind of claims are out there though? We've also got anti-pollution. So this is becoming, again, a more important trend. And again, it's not really dropping from our radar when we're testing products, because with urban areas containing high levels of pollution, there is an effect that it's having on the skin, and something that people want to kind of reverse or deal with, essentially. So things such as allergies, imperfections, skin pigmentation, dull complexion, premature skin aging, wrinkles, and irritated skin. This is all things that pollution can cause to our skin. So obviously we want some lovely skincare solutions. So some examples, and there's an example of a brand that's looking at this is The Body Shop, who I think have always been kind of out there. They kind of tick both boxes in this, because again, the kind of climate change idea of pollution, but also The Body Shop have always been known as quite kind of natural brand that are interested in things like this and have done lots to do with sustainability as well. So they've got their Skin Defense and their Drops of Youth, two different products that are both claiming anti-pollution things. So certain claims that they've got on there, things like UVA and UVB protection, indoor and outdoor pollution protection, oh my God, I can never say this word, non-comedogenic. Basically, it doesn't block the pores, it doesn't block everything, it keeps it all nice and clear. So things like this, as well as obviously other claims about the actual product itself. And then also we've got things about peels away dead skin cells and pollutants, helps protect against effects of environmental aggressors, and things about also natural origin and vegan. So I thought they were a great example, these products, of having claims that reflect both the pollution and also the green claims that we've mentioned earlier. So again, how do we test this kind of product? What kind of way will be used to substantiate these pollution claims, anti-pollution claims even? So we tested for one of the largest European contract manufacturers, a pollution defense face wash. So they wanted to make sure that the claims were compliant in relevant markets, and making sure that they are substantiating the claims around anti-pollution and removing pollutants from the skin. So our panel criteria for this was nice and straightforward. It was, again, mainly female panel, but with some male, all skin types, a large age range. It wasn't something they were too focused on. The main thing they wanted to cover was they were living in urban areas in India. So India was one of the main markets they wanted to assess. And also it's got quite a high level of pollution in a lot of the urban areas. So it was a great kind of target for us to look at for this particular study. So the test conditions we used, so again, used twice daily for 2 weeks. So quite normal for a cleanser, massage into the face, and then rinse off thoroughly. Very straightforward again for this kind of study. And again, we've got our results here. So we've got things about, do you agree your skin felt soothed? Because again, so earlier, the skin can feel quite irritated from pollutants and things like that. So we've got 90% of people saying their skin felt really soothed. It reduced impurities. It removed daily pollution. And it had improved the condition of their skin over the 2 weeks as well. So the last trend I want to talk about today is natural and organic. So this is where you might see claims like free from. It's all about supporting the natural development of the product. And you'll see certified claims as well, for example, organic. So the first thing to talk about is free from claims. Now, I think anyone who's advertising in the EU and UK is very aware about free from claims being a kind of no-go, but it's also an important thing to talk about. And I do think people get tripped up. Now, we work with a lot of US brands who then come over to the UK and they've got, covered on their packaging loads of free from claims because Americans love free from claims. It's a really, really powerful statement over there. If you don't say you're free from something, people will tend to kind of be put off, which is very interesting. And it's why this has been picked up over here to make sure it's not unfair on competition. But yeah, people get tripped up by plastering all the free from claims on there and then coming to the UK and EU and it's, you can't say that, you can't say that, you can't say that. So I would recommend for anyone advertising any cosmetic to really follow these this ruling, because it means you're not limited about what you're saying. So always consider the 6 common criteria for cosmetic claims. Now that's really important because if we go back to that, it's about fairness and things like this. So by saying things like paraben free, you are suggesting that parabens are very damaging to the skin, whereas not all parabens are. There's small amounts of research about certain parabens, but it's not enough evidence to say that they are bad. So you're suggesting they are bad, and it's not really fair in your competition. You can spread it can spread misinformation on things that are safe and legally allowed. So absolutely considered there. If something is compliant with EU regulation in terms of safety, it means it is safe for people to use. So we don't want to spread this misinformation and make people think that the cosmetic industry is out to get them. It's really interesting, and you do see a lot of people that think, oh, we can't use that, it's not good for you, it's not good for your skin. Well, the cosmetic industry is highly regulated, especially within the UK and EU. So there's nothing that is going to damage your skin, unless obviously you have very sensitive skin or certain adverse allergies. So it can stop ingredients being used and be very unfair. It's basically having a negative perception around the safety. Again, I'll kind of repeat myself here, but it's all really important to put forward. And the Cosmetics, Toiletries and Perfumery Association has created a help note for free from claims, which is really important if you want to have a look at that and understand the breakdown and what you're allowed to say. It's been taken from the European Commission's technical document on cosmetic claims, but it breaks it down in a really easy to digest format. So if that's something you're interested in, please do have a look at that. Organic claims are another one that's quite interesting. So you don't necessarily need to be certified organic, but a lot of companies are doing that. And it's really important as well to make sure that we're kind of being fair in that industry to have this kind of information. So there is an ISO you can get to be an actual organic product. So you can have a little look at that as well. There's some guidelines on there. It's really important, though, if you're going to say that you have organic or natural products, that you need to have, of course, adequate and verifiable evidence. So some more examples of these kinds of claims and what the evidence is you need. Organic, you have to have evidence that 90% or more of the product's ingredients are organic. Made with organic means that you have to have evidence that only a portion of the product's ingredients is organic, and that ranges depending on what the product is from about 10% to 20% that the ingredients need to be organic there. So obviously you need to look at that as well. And then natural, it's products containing natural ingredients or derivatives of I don't know if I said that right, of natural ingredients as well. And again, it doesn't have to be organic, but it can contain organic product there as well. So I can see some questions coming in. So I'm just going to summarize and then we'll go to a little Q&A. So it's really essential to use advertising claims to stand out against your competition. As I mentioned, I think it's really important, particularly in this product category. People have been maybe kind of skating on the excitement of being sustainable and things like that. And now it's such a congested industry. It's another really big category within the cosmetics industry. We need to make sure that we've got some more claims about our product to really stand out. It's essential to have a well-designed study and questionnaire, to have valuable data, to make sure that evidence is compliant. You need to stay compliant, sorry, there's a typo there, compliant with the Green Claims Code and the Environmental Advertising Code. I've just read this back. I'm so sorry, I rushed this a little bit before I started today. So you need to stay compliant with those codes. And obviously, it's really important to make sure that you're compliant in the countries you're selling as well. So make sure that obviously those are the codes I've mentioned about the UK in particular. Every country will have its own kind of codes there. So make sure you're compliant. Always present your evidence clearly. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you have got evidence about your products claims, you need to make sure that you are having your data displayed really, really clearly in those adverts so people can see where it came from. And always use recent evidence as part of that Green Claims Code. Remember, it's going to make sure it's up to date. Make sure you're refreshing it and staying really up to date with what your evidence is. So any questions here? I can see some coming in, but yeah, please feel free to ask away. So I've got a question in from Sonia to say, if you have a sunscreen product where you have removed some of the ingredients that are accused of being bad for the coral reef, how would you claim this on the product when the ingredients are okay to use according to the cosmetic regulation? As you say, free from claims are difficult in the EU or UK. Now, this is really important actually in terms of this. So if there's any ingredients that are banned in certain countries, now I know you're not saying that in particular right now, but this is an important thing to consider. If it's banned, so I think it was Hawaii had a certain ingredients banned because of the coral reef. Obviously, you can't claim that because it's banned, it's not legal. So by saying you don't contain it, it's basically saying that you other products that contain it are being sold there. I said that really badly, but you know what I mean. It needs to make sure that if there's a banned ingredient, you don't do it. If you are, in this example, choosing not to use ingredients because they're not banned, but you believe they are, you want to not include them in your product, you see things like claims, instead of saying free from ingredient, they'll say like coral reef safe and things like that. Now, this is always my go-to is, instead of saying denigrating claims that are negative and saying your product is free from something, go the opposite way and go positive and say things that are positive about the product but still have the same message. So things like saying, yeah, safe for the coral reef, or more environmentally friendly, things like this. I mean, obviously I'm not going to be the best with wording, but there is advice out there. And I would actually say, if you're looking at sunscreen in particular, I probably, the CTPA or similar organizations probably have really good examples of claims you can say there as well. So I hope that's answered your question. So another question that you've come in with as well. So if you claim natural, how many % of the ingredients need to be natural and not organic? Do you know what? That's a really interesting question, because it's not incredibly clear. It's one of those claims that I am not a huge fan of, because obviously it can be, people can say natural and they don't actually have that much natural product in there. And it's something that is getting more and more regulated. So obviously, like I said, with the new Green Claims Code and things like that, it's really staying up to date about what's allowed. It will change as well from different countries and things like that. So again, look at those relevant regulatory bodies and see what they're saying about it. They may have even updated it since I kind of put that slide in there to say but there isn't a certain percentage. There may be now in certain countries a certain percentage that you have to use. But the organic, I think, is much more clear and stricter than I would say the natural is at the moment. So I've got a question to say, what constitutes substantiation for a cruelty-free claim? Can an ingredient like lanolin be considered cruelty-free, or is it simply being animal-derived and non-starter? So cruelty-free claims, I'm not going to lie, are not my absolute speciality. We really specialize in the consumer perception claims. But again, looking at places like the CTPA to see what their information is. Now, when it comes to cruelty-free, there are some strict rules about what you have to what processes you have to go through, again, country to country, but you can look at the regulatory bodies and see what their caveats are. And again, if that's something you really want to go down, things like the Leaping Bunny certification is the best thing you can do, and they have incredibly clear guidelines about, like I said, everything from the where the ingredients come from, how the product's formulated, everything like that has to be completely cruelty free. So if that's something you're passionate about, I would go down the Leaping Bunny certification guide side. So what methods are best methods for validating anti-pollution claims? So as I said, there is going to be usually something like a body. When it comes to anti-pollution, you'll have a body of evidence. So the examples that I've given in particular are going to be mainly about the side of the perception. So do the consumers perceive those effects? Do they think that their skin's clear and their skin's improved and it's soothed and everything like that, to make sure there's anti-pollution there? But there are different instrumental studies that are required to make sure that the product is doing what it needs to do on a much more scientific level as well. I'm not going to have that off the top of my head, but if you want any more information, I can find that out for you. So if you have got, if you want to drop me an email, I'll share it after. If you've got a particular product and certain claims you're trying to make, I can give you some more guided information there as well. So another question here saying, isn't it more than 95% and not 90% of natural and organic ingredients that we need in the formula, so we can say natural or organic? That's a really good point. So in that case, you're looking at the ISO certification, which may need to have more than 95%. The information about just saying organic but not being certified was more than 90%. Now, again, I probably did that slide about 6 months ago. It may have changed, is where it's really important to stay on top of regulations. But as you said, ISO certification is something a little bit different. You don't necessarily have to be ISO certificated to have the organic claim. So there's going to be different levels depending on if you want to be certified or not. So I hope that helps there as well. So I've come to the end of the questions there, but as ever, I will share my email address as well as the webinar recording at the end of the webinar today. So you can reach out to me directly if you've got some further questions you want to ask or want some more detailed information. I'll be able to share that with you. I'm going to answer one more question I can see coming in. So if the CMA green code is breached, will products be investigated in 2022 for greenwashing? It's a very good question. And honestly, I do not have the answer on the top of my head. It's all a really, really new process that I'm aware of in terms of the green claims code. But if you breach the green claims code, it will be investigated in terms of if someone reports you. So at this time, as far as I'm aware, it's still going to be managed by things like the ASA, where they're going to look into products on a complaints basis, but there may be investigations coming in. I'm sorry, I don't have more information on that. So just to round up, we are sponsoring the IFSC Congress in 2022. So make sure you register your interest over at the website there and come along next year. I have another webinar coming up this month. So in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be looking at compliant and effective advertising in Southeast Asia. Do not forget that we have a YouTube channel with all of our previous webinars on. So please go on and like and subscribe. So if you can't attend live on the day, you get our whole library of previous webinars on there, and you'll always be up to date with any new recordings that go on there as well. There is my contact information, but I'll be following up with an email, so you'll be able to reach out to me directly. Thank you so much for listening today. As I said, I know I don't have all the detailed information, but I hope that's given you a good insight into some of the green claims and how they get substantiated, particularly in terms of perception claims as well. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a fantastic weekend.